There's this company called SpaceX, and SpaceX does a number of different things, but one of the projects that they've been working on and off, is this thing called Starlink. And Starlink is a constellation of satellites. Originally, I think the number was 15,000 satellites. I'm looking to the rest of the panel. And then I think it was downgraded to about half that.
I thought they scaled it up.
63. Yeah.
They scaled it up past 15,000?
Yeah. Like 20,000, yeah.
Yeah.
24? Yeah.
I thought they were scaling it down. Well, let's just say maybe there's a mixed message on that.
It's a shit ton of satellites.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Right now, there are 120 satellites up there. Starlink satellites, the first generation, which are up there spinning around. And these satellites orbit the Earth in low Earth orbit. Right now, there's 120 of them, and eventually someday there could be as many as 15 or 20,000 of them to complete Starlink, which would provide satellite accessible internet service around the world, or at least around most of the world. Astronomers are kind of up in arms about this because all of a sudden the night sky has lines in it. This is a 330-second exposure. And forgive me, I don't remember the name of the observatory, but you can see all those diagonal tracks are Starlink satellites. Normally, they're just getting stars or maybe one or two satellites. Because these are super highly reflective, because they're in low Earth orbit, because there's so many of them, this is a problem. Again, by some astronomers. I think the issue that I wanted to just explore briefly, at least, was this is a private company launching these satellites up into the sky.
Which has been approved by the Federal Commission. So they applied for it, and they were approved to do so.
No argument.
No argument.
So it's not like this is a company that just decided to launch satellites and did it without asking.
Doing it.
Yeah, there's also two other companies that are trying to do it as well.
Yes,
and other countries. You're going to have so much space junk up there that no sun will hit the Earth.
It's not that. So the one thing I want to point out is that these things are on a regular path. You know exactly where they're going to be and when. You could just tell the computer to ignore those pixels. Yeah. All right, it's 9:55. Ignore pixels 7, 8, and 10 as it goes across.
Oh, good God.
But I'm
not sure that rationally braces the way digital imaging works.
Oh yeah, they have to.
These are huge. They can do it.
Yeah, anybody who's into has a giant telescope understands that you have to be able to compensate for that. There's atmospheric distortion and other things, and dead pixels in your receiver, and all sorts of things. So, as Casey said, that these are easy to compensate for.
Yep. And then, so the next point with that is that Elon has offered to launch them space observatories, so that way they don't even have to worry about doing the compensation.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
One other thing that they're going to be doing apparently is the latest batch that will go up is they're changing the exterior of the units, so they're not light reflecting. They're more of a flat black that will not spread light more than it needs to.
Yep, and I think they said 1 to 3 of them on this next launch are going to be the trial of a couple different methods.
They're testing it, and if the test works out well, then they'll all be that way.
But I certainly will concede that if you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 companies all wanting to do something like this, or countries or combinations, there is going to come a point where it's going to be trouble.
It's funny. The Iridium system was supposed to have 77 satellites, and that was like a huge network at the time.
Yeah.
And now these are order of magnitude more. It's funny.
Yeah.
So Iridium's a lot higher, right?
Yeah.
And they're geostationary?
I don't think they're geostationary.
No,
that was part of
they are a lot higher. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Which
here
is why
in the Forbes article, it says that there's Kuiper Systems and OneWeb are planning to launch similar networks. Starlink is attempting to procure approval for a total of 42,000 satellites.
42,000, wow.
42,000.
So if you got 42,000 satellites circling Earth and you want to send a spaceship up with people on it, like
space is big.
Like,
no, you know exactly where they're going to be, and you just make sure that you don't set it up at the same time. That thing's
but if you're like
way.
a second late, you're going to like smack into one of those.
Well, Paul, you do realize that with all the space junk that's currently up there, it is supposed to be tracked, and they link those into launches as well. So they're looking for every piece of space junk or existing infrastructure, and they time their launches based on what is there.
There's a lot of stuff. It's very meticulously tracked. But again, I think the part here that our regulators or lack of regulators is we didn't really have a discussion. Like how important this project is to each of those companies, I get. How important is that project to us, and what potentially we're giving up or going to compromise, or maybe nothing. Maybe we'll all just get magic internet service. But
it affects the whole world, right? Like who's to say that America can own space? Like what about China and Russia and India?
Well, Paul, let's be real. We own everything, okay? And by we, I mean the United States of America. So just, take your communist bullshit and...
Well, plus when we had the opportunity to monopolize it, we stepped back and made it more open. And recently there was a satellite that launched the ability for rich people to have meteor showers on demand. So basically you tell them when and where, give them the money, and then they'll launch like ball bearings into the correct path so you can have your own on demand.
Jeez.
Yeah.
In your backyard?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
for your
good
party.
God.
Yeah.
What's wrong with fireworks?
It's so yesterday, Paul.
Yeah.
That's sad.
But you know what? That is a valid argument that if Starlink is looking for 42,000 satellites, and there's Kuiper and OneWeb, and if each of them are looking for tens of thousands of satellites, and that's the United States.
Yeah.
And let's say someone in Japan wants tens of thousands of satellites, India wants tens of thousands of satellites, and China, of course,
gets 1 billion.
Yeah.
So wait till the Canada arm starts chucking them out. Look out.
Yeah. So we're
the Canada arm's going to be busy.
I'll make one of my predictions.
Yeah.
We're going to come to regret this decision.
We might.
We're going to come to regret this decision, that we didn't think it out more carefully, that we didn't require anybody that got approved had thought about this, wasn't experimenting, wasn't iterating the versions of satellites as they're launching them, and that we'd moved a little more deliberately. That's all. Yay,
well, there also is the ability, Russell, is that these satellites can be remotely moved out of orbit, burn up in Earth's atmosphere. If there's something with a particular satellite that's incorrect, or it's in a wrong orbit, or they can burn them into the atmosphere and make them disappear.
They're only good for a few years anyway, aren't they?
At this low orbit.
Say.
Yeah.
Yeah, these aren't like Sputnik orbiting
actually,
the world forever.
Actually, SpaceX's plan was to launch them at a higher altitude. It was the regulatory body that made them come down instead of going to the orbit they wanted to.
Well, if you guys are interested in this,
companies have to pay like a cleanup fund for everyone they launch if there's problems, or
I think that they're now
just like the oil companies, Paul.
I don't think it's like that. I think now like they do have to make sure that they at least deorbit the infrastructure. So like the Air Force actually on this last launch, the Air Force actually paid for them to do a test to see how long they could go before refiring the fuel, and then also to make sure that the vehicle came back to Earth and not just stay parked up there, because while space is big, we don't want it full of garbage because it's dangerous garbage.
Because we have the ocean for that.
We have the ocean for that.
Yeah, exactly. We just keep dumping crap in the ocean.
Bag.
Yeah.
That certainly hasn't ever bitten us.
They just charge some rich bastard and tell them they have their own meteor shower, and they...
Yeah. So you get to clean it up and charge somebody for it. Boom.
Yeah.
You've made money now.
A whole new business plan.